Okay, so right now what I'm going to be doing is I'm going to be analyzing two drawings by the great Jacopo Pontormo, Mannerist painter, 1500s. And you have to remember, after the sack of Rome in 1527, that was basically the end of the High Renaissance. And after that, we had a period of artists who wanted to be a little bit different than their predecessors and not be so stuck with all the rules of like the pyramid composition, things like that. So we have these artists that we call the Mannerists, maniera. Which just means, style. And what they did is they broke the formality of the High Renaissance and created what we now know to be kind of elongated figures, kind of like El Greco, Pontormo, Parmigianino, artists such as that. So what we're going to look at right now are two images by Pontormo, one male and then one female. And you're going to see that he's very aggressive with his anatomy. And it's quite stunning. And I know before I knew anatomy, I had no idea what was going on with an image like this, whether it was Peter Paul Rubens or Pontormo or Michelangelo. But it's this deep knowledge that they had. And what they do is basically almost contract every muscle. And this goes back to the times of the ancient Greeks. And what you're going to find with ancient Greeks is this, and this is something that I have tried really hard to explain to my students, as to why they look the way they do, meaning, these incredibly wonderful sculptures like of Hercules. And the way I figured out how to explain it is this. Every once in a while, you're in a figure drawing class, and you have the model, he or she will be up there. And because they're living, breathing human beings, you'll notice that they'll kind of catch their weight, or they'll shift a little bit just to get a little bit more comfortable, shrug a shoulder, move their neck around a little bit, and then get back into it. Well, in those little minute movements, you're going to find all sorts of muscles that pop out. Oftentimes, I tell my students to watch for every little movement, the taking in of a deep breath, because all of a sudden it reveals the rib cage. It contracts certain muscles, relaxes others. And in those contractions, what I want my students to do and what I want you to consider is to take mental notes. And those are the times that you pull out these muscles. So it finally came to me that the reason some of these pieces of art throughout history look so dynamic and they're so anatomically aggressive is because if you could imagine flexing every single muscle of your body, but in a very relaxed pose, like you're just sitting, having a cup of tea. And that can't happen in real life, but it can happen in art. So when you look at some of these images, like the ones I'm going to draw over for you, you're going to find that all these muscles are contracted, but in a relatively relaxed pose. Somebody holding a staff, or somebody just waiting for the bus, but imagine every muscle contracted. So let's look at this first image. So a Pontormo male. There's going to be certain muscles I'm going to talk about that you just will not see on any living human being unless they're doing a pull-up or some kind of exercise, and they would have to be very, very lean. So for instance, I'm going to look for it and find C7. It's that little bump on the back of your neck. What I tell my students is one of the things that we all know, and every anatomy teacher will tell you, is like the pit of the neck. How many times do you hear that? And it's C7. So to me, I kind of liken it to my T-shirt. The front of my T-shirt, where my finger is the pit of the neck. The tag on my T-shirt roughly is C7. So if we take a look at this, that's a good, pretty good little indicator. The spine, of course, kind of runs down this little area right here. It's impossible to miss. One of the things also that you're going to see is this, that you can see the side of the body here, but then all of a sudden you don't. So meaning it kind of like shifts over like that. And all of a sudden you only see side. So over here is side. Over here is where the scapulas are going to be. Do you see that? It's kind of like this twisting of the form. So all of a sudden, it's like it disappears. And all of a sudden, you actually even see the front of the body over here. So it's this twisting that I really like. So it's like taking a box and twisting it. Here's the shoulder, and it goes off in that direction. All right, so here is the spine, which disappears because, of course, now the hip is facing you, the side of the hip is facing you, but the back is twisting. So all of a sudden you can see the left side over here, and the right side over here is a little bit fuller. So the scapula. This little area here is the acromion process. I can tell because the deltoid surrounds it. It's kind of cupped around it like this. This general shape right in there. See that could be put onto there as if it was like a model airplane diagram. Kind of like that. It surrounds the spine of the scapula. So that is a good indicator. This little spot right here is this right there. So seeing that, you could see the trajectory of the spine of the scapula, which ends right here. I liken it to clock hands. So here's like a little clock, and these are the clock hands. Like in this case, it's like 1:33 in the afternoon, or if you're a night owl, in the morning. So what we have is we have that. Now, the change of direction, the other clock hand does this. And this is the bottom part right in here. Okay? I liken the scapula. I'm going to do a Pictionary version of South America. That's it. Do you see it over here? South America. So this is the Tierra del Fuego down here, way down here. So, and then here's the clock hands. So you went from a continent to clock hands. So now, seeing that, this is the Tierra del Fuego. Because every time I see that, I always know, always, that the teres major is underneath there. In this case, he drew it so big, it looks like a hot dog, like the bun. Looks like a big old submarine sandwich. All right? Now, the muscle that I told you about that you are not going to see on very many human beings is this one. And he drew it so big, you can't help but to see it. That's a teres minor. And as I've said with other images, the long head of the tricep jumps in between those two little spots. So there's like a little hole here that allows these two muscles to kind of split open and the long head of the tricep to jump through. And the long head of the tricep ends here, and it butts up against, and it makes like a little butt against the tricep lateral head. The tricep lateral head has like a little tail, almost like it's a little mouse. And that oftentimes is mistakenly seen as a tendon, but it's not. This is the tricep tendon. So that takes you right to the elbow, which straightens your arm. The tricep medial head, you can see just a tiny bit of arc. So that's a tricep medial head. Tri-med. All right, so now underneath here, underneath the deltoid, where I'm putting that very light circle, that is the head of the humerus. The deltoid obviously surrounds it, but oftentimes you could still see evidence of that little ball in there. So this is the deltoid. This muscle here that I'm putting in now is the infraspinatus. And sometimes you could see a little, almost like bundling of that, but it's one muscle, even though sometimes it looks like two, sometimes even three. And that's attached over here where that little spot is. So see where this little spot is right here? The teres minor and infraspinatus are attached underneath there on the humerus, just below the ball. The teres major is attached to the front of it. But regardless, the deltoid surrounds all of that. So that's why you can't see any of that. And it meanders about. And sometimes you can see, as the arm goes up, this bundling takes place. And it gets more and more bundled, as you'll see later with like maybe an arm up. Okay, so, and then the tendon is over here. The tendon of the trapezius is this little area here. And the trapezius does this, and he draws it in a kind of a funky little way. It creates a bubble here and a lower bubble down there, but this is all trapezius. The trapezius surrounds C7, and it goes up to the base of the skull. It does this, and in this case, because he's twisting, you can see a little bit of bundling, and it's attached to the acromion process and the spine of the scapula. It makes its way around here and then all the way down. So I'm just retracing my trek. This little area here where the tendon is attached, in some cases like Michelangelo, he draws it like you're putting your thumbs into soft clay. He draws that like it's a hole. The latissimus dorsi always shares a border, kind of like Mexico and the United States, right over here with the teres major. Sometimes it overlaps just a little bit. That's why I'm purposely kind of going right over that a little bit. Because it's like holding up a sheet. Sometimes it rolls up a little bit, and sometimes it's below it. But watch for that, because sometimes you could actually even see a little bit of that tug right there. The latissimus dorsi is also attached to the front of the humerus. And that is important to know. And later on, when I show you under the arm, you'll see what I mean. Then it comes back down like this. And now this is going to be a really important lesson right now. The latissimus dorsi actually has a few little attachments right here to ribs. The actual body of that muscle kind of does this, but it disappears into the fat pad that covers the external oblique, which I'm going to draw right here. Okay, this is like the flank portion of the external oblique. This is the anterior superior iliac spine. Oftentimes we just write it as is, almost like you're at a yard sale. Everything's as is. No guarantees, no warranties. So the external oblique and the serratus anterior, you could see the fingers of the serratus anterior popping through from underneath. It's almost like toes from underneath the covers. You'll see it very clearly as like these little digitations, little fingers like that. And they're kind of round. And they interdigitate with the external oblique like this. And over here, the external oblique is also attached to the ribs right in here. And it becomes, because there's nothing underneath, there's no rib cage, it flares out and becomes the flank portion of the external oblique. These muscle fibers just end right up about here, and then they attach to the center of the front of the body by an aponeurosis. But in this case right here, you can see that the rectus abdominis is bunched around because he's bending over here. And then right at the belly button, there's the part that sticks out the furthest, going down to the pubic bone. I can always tell where the pubic bone is. If I go across the body like this, then that's where the great trochanter is. And that's that little hollow space.
There is a lot of value in online art education. We have so much great instruction on NMA that is so easily accessible. Even when I was in school learning to draw and paint, nothing was online. Wherever you are in the world, you can get this instruction. And not only can you watch these lessons that are so valuable and so in-depth and so passionately instructed, but you can watch them again and again and again.